They whisper through the screens you trust, slipping ideas like coins into a slot you never notice. These suggestions thread into your thoughts until they feel like your own, quiet as a second heartbeat. Every feed, every headline, every trending topic is a carefully placed nudge, not a neutral mirror. The difference between information and instruction is thinner than you think, and thinner still than you are taught to fear. Influence moves like a current beneath calm water, invisible but powerful, steering thousands in the same direction. You think you choose the path, but the path was paved long before you ever arrived, laid by hands you never saw. Advertisers learned to dress desires as needs, and institutions learned to dress obedience as safety. When fear is engineered, consent follows. Subtle, obedient, and easy to harvest. Language is a tool, shaped to limit the range of thought you are allowed to inhabit. Words carve grooves in your mind. Repeat the right ones enough and a thought becomes ritual. Social proof is the quiet tyrant of the modern age. The more people who nod, the easier it is to stop thinking. We follow crowds because it relieves the burden of deciding, and those who design the crowd know this intimately. They study you like a map, charting emotional terrain and planting landmarks to guide your steps. Every like, share, and pause is data to be weaponized, turned into more precise directions for your behavior. Authority is manufactured with methods so subtle you call it tradition and common sense. But often, tradition is just the archive of previous manipulations dressed as wisdom. Doubt is the enemy of control, and so it is minimized, mocked, or redirected until you laugh at your own suspicion. Ridicule is a silencer more effective than any ban. It makes the seeker feel absurd and retreat into silence. Attention is the currency, and they are the mint. They tax your focus with distractions until the important is buried under noise. Anxiety, outrage, and entertainment become the toll booths on the road to awareness, draining you of will to look deeper. Choice illusion is the masterpiece. Give many options while shaping all outcomes toward the same conclusion. Freedom reduced to curated menus is freedom only in name. The architecture around the menus decides your limits. Emotional triggers are mapped and exploited with surgical precision to produce predictable responses. Compassion and anger are mobilized like troops, easy to deploy, harder to call home once they march. Memory is not neutral either. History can be trimmed, emphasized, or rewritten so that the present feels inevitable. If you cannot remember alternatives, you will assume the current state is natural, necessary, and permanent. Education, once a battlefield of ideas, became a conveyor belt of approved conclusions and testable compliance. Critical thinking is discouraged by systems that measure obedience more easily than imagination. They do not always use force. They prefer to cultivate habits that do the work of compliance on their behalf. Habits cheapen resistance. The more automated your life, the less chance you will interrupt the pattern long enough to see the mechanism. Censorship now often wears camouflage. Algorithms bury dissent under layers of noise rather than erasing it outright. If the truth is still there but unseen, it is powerless, and that is the goal. Invisibility is the new erasure. Symbols and narratives are planted like seeds to sprout allegiance when conditions are right. Stories forge identity. Identity shapes loyalty. Loyalty makes control a matter of pedigree rather than force. Trust is monetized. Once you trust a platform, that trust is sold back to you as curated reality. Your trust becomes a lever, used to tilt the world in directions you would not choose if you saw the fulcrum. Isolation is engineered in tiny doses. Fragmentation of communities means fewer collective checks against abuse. Divide and distract. Two simple movements that transform crowds into manageable atoms. Skepticism is skill, and it is being starved in modern culture. Practice doubt, and they label you toxic. Remain gullible, and you remain pliable. They frame inquiry as extremism while presenting acquiescence as virtue, and the line between courage and taboo blurs. Comfort is a chain disguised as a pillow. The softer it feels, the heavier it grips over time. The path of least resistance is always the one that benefits those who carved the map. Influencers are the new missionaries of conformity, preaching lifestyles dressed as authenticity. Authenticity sold as a product is authenticity amputated. Expressive, performative, and pre-approved. The most effective manipulation is the one that makes you doubt your doubts, turning rebel into apologizer. When second-guessing becomes second nature, the system rewrites itself as morality, and you volunteer as adherent. Resistance is often social, not physical. It requires companions, vocabulary, and rituals of remembering. Alone, doubt whimpers. Together, it becomes a language that can topple an edifice built on silence. They fear the slow spread of clarity because ideas propagate in ways force cannot predict or fully contain. An awakened person seeds others. A network of awakenings changes probabilities and collapses engineered certainties. The solution is not paranoia, but practice. Practice looking at what you were told to ignore, and practice naming the patterns. Recognition is the first sabotage of manipulation. Naming hammer blows at the scaffolding until it loosens. If you want to reclaim agency, begin by auditing small things. Why you believe, who benefits, and what alternatives were erased. The small acts of inquiry become muscles of resistance, trained through repetition until doubt is reflex. This is where the story begins, not ends. You have been conditioned, yes, but conditioning is reversible with attention and community. The choice to look, to question, to gather others, is the first insurgency against invisible rule. The architects of control understand rhythm. Overwhelm, then relieve, repeat. This cycle exhausts you into compliance. Your fatigue is their strongest ally, because tired minds surrender faster than defiant ones. They seed contradictions deliberately, ensuring confusion becomes the default state. When you are lost in uncertainty, you grasp for authority, and they are always waiting with ready answers. Surveillance no longer feels invasive because it has been normalized into convenience. Each app you download, each term you accept, is a voluntary surrender dressed as efficiency. Fear of irrelevance is weaponized. To keep up, you conform. To conform, you trade autonomy for belonging. Every scroll, every trend becomes a small contract signed in silence, binding you deeper. Power no longer shouts, it whispers in customization. The illusion of a personalized world blinds you to its cage. The more tailored your reality, the less chance you have of noticing what is excluded. They don't need to forbid your choices if they can shape your desires beforehand. Desires built in labs of psychology feel natural because you never witness the crafting of your appetite. Scarcity is manufactured. Urgency floods markets, politics, and culture, making you act before thinking. In haste, you sign away freedoms you would guard fiercely if you had paused for reflection. Manipulation thrives on invisibility. When the puppet strings are hidden, you dance willingly. Exposed, the strings break, because no one likes to admit their movements were never their own. Children are trained earliest, absorbing authority as truth before they can question its source. Habits planted in childhood harden into chains that feel like identity rather than programming. Heroes and villains are assigned to you. Narratives simplify the world into binaries, leaving no space for nuance. With clear enemies and celebrated idols, your loyalty can be directed like a spotlight. Consensus is an illusion painted on walls of silence. People doubt privately but speak conformity aloud. This chorus of false agreement convinces each doubter they are alone, when in truth they are many. Hope is manipulated as much as fear. Promises of progress, unity, or salvation become bait to keep you patient. By deferring your freedom to the future, they ensure obedience in the present. Symbols become chains of the mind. Flags, icons, slogans, each tether binds thought more tightly than chains of iron. You defend them fiercely even when they cage you, because they have fused with your identity. Control thrives in distraction. Endless entertainment floods your senses, leaving little room for reflection. Each laugh, each thrill, is another second stolen from awareness, another step away from clarity. The illusion of rebellion is also sold back to you. Choices that feel radical are often pre-approved variations. By giving you a sandbox to rage in, they keep your anger contained and harmless. Divide and conquer is older than empires, but in the digital age it has infinite precision. Communities fracture along manufactured lines until unity becomes impossible, leaving power unchallenged. When doubt rises, self-doubt is engineered to smother it. You are told you are paranoid, unstable, or naive. Doubt without confidence collapses into surrender, and the cycle begins again. But cracks form in every structure. A single question spreads like fire, igniting recognition in others. The awareness of one can ripple into the clarity of thousands, and this terrifies those in power. Patterns are the enemy of secrecy. Once you see them repeat, you can predict their next move. Prediction grants power. Suddenly, the magician's trick is spoiled, and the illusion collapses. To resist manipulation, you must reclaim silence and attention, starve the system of what it feeds on. When you observe without reacting, you weaken the circuits built to harvest your emotions. Community is your shield. Alone, skepticism is fragile. Together, it is amplified and legitimized. A collective of awakenings becomes harder to dismiss, ridicule, or bury under noise. The chains are not indestructible. They are psychological, and psychology can be rewired. Each act of questioning bends the bars until they weaken. Each truth spoken is a crack in the cage. Freedom begins when you recognize your mind has been colonized, and the invaders are subtle. Take back territory thought by thought, choice by choice, until the architecture of control collapses. The question is not whether they control you. They do. The real question is whether you will let it continue. Will you wake, or will you remain a volunteer in the empire of illusions? If you choose to see, if you choose to resist, then act now. Subscribe and join the ones who refuse to be silenced. Together, we will unravel the lies, expose the manipulations, and reclaim the freedom they never wanted you to find.